at one point during the construction of the line, they will buy 25% of the world's supply of heavy steel to build this facility.
Wow.
Just think about that.
Wow.
The whole area is the size of Massachusetts. They expect on its own that area to consume as much power as all of Poland. In the past, the UAE had the money but didn't have the market.
Yeah.
Egypt had the market but not the money, and Saudi has both. And beyond that, you're combining that with huge initiative from the government and so much clarity on where they want to take the country and the economy. Her Royal Highness Princess Rima's letter outlined the numbers pretty clearly.
That letter was just boss.
300,000 startups run by women, 25% of all SMEs.
Can we just talk about the WTA? If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You guys are accusing us, and it really bothers me, this point, of not having inclusivity or women's rights. If any one of them came to Saudi to see what it's like, they would go back on their word.
I will tell you a crazy, crazy stat that I heard at FII this year.
At an altitude of 37,000 feet, we soar, with a rich legacy of honoring our guests and a unique style that has resonated with the world for 78 years. We carry the name of our country on every journey and across every sky. We are Saudi. We welcome you in our own way. We shape our present and build our future. Saudia, our name and country, our style and approach, striving for excellence in everything we do. This is how we fly.
All right. Okay, now it's recording. Perfect. We just had a little blurb, let's say, but there's take two is never a bad thing. Thank you, Cameron, for coming on the show. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to a new episode of the Mo Show podcast. Cameron Porter, much appreciated. I know you didn't fly into Saudi for me, but I'm glad you spared some time for me while you are here. How's the experience been so far?
It's been a true pleasure to be here. I'm in the hometown of my business partner, Talal Atiyah, and it's my second time in the kingdom, but hopefully the second time of many, many, many more to come. And it's been a wonderful weekend already and week. We had the kickoff with the E1 boat series, one of the big initiatives from the Ministry of Sport, and one of many in sporting and industrials, which is the real focus of what I'm doing here. But I'm truly excited to have this conversation. And although you downplayed it, it is a big reason I'm here. And I reached out to you because I think there's an important story to be told and hopefully heard by more people, not only in Saudi, but in the US and beyond.
I'm so honored, honestly. It means a lot. And what really interests me in the work you do is that it's something I know little about, and it's far from, what I do now or even, my 13 years in corporate. So when I ask a question, believe that it's going to be very genuine. I'm definitely going to want to know the answer, and I hope that many of the people listening will take interest to it as well. Steel Atlas is the name of the company. You're the managing director there. What kind of projects will we be able to see in Saudi from the tech that you guys will be working on over here?
Yeah, so what we do as a firm is people in the US consider us to be an early stage technology venture capital fund. So what that means is we go and identify companies at the beginning of their formation with new technologies meant to innovate and make disruption in markets around the world. What makes our approach unique is that we focus on industrial technologies. And so we look at where volatility is occurring. And so this could be in baseload power prices or critical mineral prices or freight prices. And we try to find the technologies that mitigate those volatilities. But what makes us even more unique is that where we think the most important opportunities are occurring in industrials today is here in Saudi Arabia. It's the country in the world where you have the strongest and most forward-looking initiatives, namely Saudi Vision 2030, that are making it possible to bring these types of novel technologies to market, really for the first time. And so by bridging that gap and connecting these two places through the lens of venture capital, we hope to bring some of the most advanced technologies in the world to fruition here in the kingdom, whether it's looking at radioisotope production or novel battery chemistries or even new technologies for extracting minerals like magnesium or lithium from desalination facilities, where Saudi is a world leader.
This is some real complex stuff. I mean, I know I said that it's something I don't know much about, but I thought to know a little about, but I don't know what ultra hyper magnesium, I'm just going to say random thing. I don't know what that all means. Is this something that you studied back in the day, or have you just learned it in the last couple of years leading up to?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey to this point, because I think if you met me as a young boy in Dayton, Ohio, I don't think you'd find me sitting in a chair in Jeddah talking about industrial assets and hypermagnesium, blah, blah, blah. Because my path was a winding one. I was fortunate to study computer science at Princeton, but it wasn't a straight shot to industrials even then. I had a detour playing professional soccer and Major League Soccer in the US, and found my way into the world of venture capital from there, and was truly fortunate and blessed to be hired by a man named Kevin Ryan, who he initially made a large sum of capital selling DoubleClick, the advertising company, to Google, and starting a firm that I think was the world's first venture studio. So we would build companies kind of every year, focused on solving problems primarily in the US, everything from renewable energy food truck fleets to prescription therapeutics. And alongside that, I was focused on investing in really what were our industrial or frontier tech assets. And it was really learning by doing, talking to early stage founders, people who were world experts in their domain, and trying to understand and evaluate their technologies. And I think as you start to do this more and more, you come to realize that so much of what prevents us from understanding a topic or engaging with it isn't necessarily the complexity of the topic itself, but simply the language. I mean, I think being here is a perfect example of that. Even though we speak different languages here, I'm English, I don't speak Arabic, we're all the same people, and we have all the same patterns and the same understandings. And the same thing in technology is when you can get past the lingo, when you can understand what are the different components of a nuclear energy system, you can start to realize where there's opportunities to deploy these assets and these technologies. And really the work we do is bridging that gap. How do we go and understand these early stage technologies? How do we translate it? How do we make it make sense in a commercialization standpoint? And then how do we bring them to a place that's really going to benefit from them? And it's simply practice by doing, whether it was on the soccer field, playing in Major League Soccer, or now doing it in the context of venture capital.
In all honesty, I think it's really rare to have someone who's an ex-professional sports player go and do what you're doing, which to me sounds like stuff that they do at NASA. It's diverse. I think it's a testament to your skill set, and really it's profound, because normally, like, I don't feel like God gives that much diverse talent to one person. You're either playing sports professionally, or you could be qualified for NASA or Steel Atlas. But I want to talk about soccer. You must have practiced all your life to make it on a professional level. The MLS is a solid league, and to play a few years there is not something that's going to come easily. What was the experience like playing on a professional level?
It was a dream come true. I think as a young kid growing up in Dayton, Ohio, I could dream of playing in professional sports. I remember seeing, or I think I got traded Manchester United cards for the first time at a soccer tournament. And I was like, who are these people? Who are these idols? And growing up, it was around the time that MLS was just coming into being in the mid 1990s. It reminds me of what's happening with the Saudi Pro League now, and being a player going to Columbus Crew as the local MLS team games, and seeing the possibility that this could be something I could do. I remember going to practice, and even practicing in my garage, and just always being encouraged by my parents that the most important thing was simply to work hard and have fun. And that carries you through many things in life. But getting to the professional level, I think, is both a dream and an eye-opening experience. I think something that most people don't talk about in pro sports is that it ends up being very different than everything leading up to it. When you're an amateur, when you're playing in college, what matters most is winning. And you're on a college sports team with your friends, and you just want to win together. And then when you go to the pro level, it changes slightly. You have money, you have contracts, and you have different incentives. So although you lose some of that purity, you have different incentives, and it's a huge honor to represent a city, represent a country, to play in front of 40,000 people. But it comes with new pressures, and all that creates this wonderful roller coaster that I think prepares you in certain ways for different facets of life.
How many years did you play in the MLS?
So I played for 3 years, and I was fortunate to play for two teams. First, the Montreal Impact, and then Sporting Kansas City. And I think I had, even in this 3-year period, a very kind of condensed experience of both the highest highs and the lowest lows. I remember after I dropped out of Princeton, I truly did not expect to even touch the field my rookie year. We were playing in the Champions League, and we had made it to the quarterfinals. We played our first game away from home in Pachuca in Mexico. We tied that game 2-2 in an unbelievable match. I was fortunate to go in. And then we were coming back home, and for a massive game, they called it the most historic game in Montreal soccer history. And during that game, we went down 1-0. I wasn't in the game. And then in the 89th minute, my coach subbed me in, put me in at forward. By the 93rd minute, we were ticking, the time's going by. I end up playing Callum Malice, one of my teammates, a long 40-yard ball up the field, collected off my chest and score this goal that puts us through to the semifinals. The entire stadium, 40,000 people, erupt all at once. It's the biggest crowd I've ever played in front of, by far. It's my first home game ever. And I just remember the reverberations, not only of the people screaming, but literally setting off fireworks in this Olympic stadium, indoors. And just being like, this is what pro sports can offer. It's the highest high.
It's euphoric.
It's euphoric. And there's truly so few moments in life, especially in the States, where you have so many people focused on one thing. I think you guys actually here experience it more often with the call to prayer and all these things. It's very different. But in the U.S., having everyone focused on one thing, it was unbelievable. So that was the highs. 3 games later in Patriot Stadium, I blew out my knee entirely. ACL, LCL, IT.
Boston?
In Boston.
Gillette.
Yeah, in Gillette. Yeah. Playing against the New England Revolution.
And you tore your...
ACL, LCL, IT band, hamstring, all at once.
In one motion, in one play, on one play?
Yeah, I don't recommend doing headers is what it comes down to, but jumped up for the ball, I came down, my knee basically exploded sideways.
Were you untouched?
Untouched.
Those are the worst in basketball. Yeah. They say that when you're not touched, those are the worst.
It truly, like when I saw the doctors, they thought I was in a car accident. And so that was the beginning of my playing career. You go from thinking you've made the smartest choice in the world, dropping out of Princeton, where I remember there was I think it was a Reddit thread, because I studied computer science, and at the time you got paid incredible salaries to go be an engineer at Google. And people were joking after this big goal. They're like, who is this guy? Why did he take a pay cut to go play pro sports? And then a few games later, I was like, oh, it's so silly. Then you blow out your knee and you're like, wow, like this is a hard job. And then spending a year where for that first 3 months, you're spending 5 hours a day doing recovery, just trying to learn how to bend your knee again, to then like rebuilding your muscles that have fully atrophied, to getting over the psychological burden of having such a traumatic injury, to get back on the field and play again. And you realize the hardship that some of these players go to. And looking at like Ronaldo and Messi and these people that have played for so many years, just thinking about all the care that's gone into making them capable of doing that, you really start to appreciate kind of the difficulties and why it matters so much, why these players cry on the field when they win and they score, because they pour so much into this.
Emotion.
Yeah. When
did you know that you're going to hang up the gloves?
Yeah, so it was after I got traded to Sporting KC, and I'd come back and I felt like I was becoming the player that I was, and was back on the field. I was participating in games again, and we'd actually made it to the finals of the U.S. Open Cup, so basically the equivalent of the FA Cup in England. And I was like, wow, we've finally made it back. And then in training, I was shielding a ball. Someone slide tackles through my right ankle. I ended up breaking both my tibia and my fibia and all the joints along my ankle. And so I ended up getting 2 metal plates put in. And I just distinctly remember the feeling of realizing that, unlike with that first major injury, that I just didn't have that same fire. I had the feeling that the thought that went through my head is, what's it going to be like if I can't play with my kids 20 years from now? And that was the thought. But it ended on a high note. We ended up winning the Open Cup at home. My grandparents were there. My mom was there. And so the beautiful finish to the career was just being on the field with that trophy, surrounded by the people that had supported me throughout my life, driving me to games, showing up for me, taking care of me when I was injured, even when I was playing pro. And so ultimately, it's an experience where I feel like I got the whole breadth of what it has to offer. Even if I didn't play for 12 years or 15 years or 20 years like Brady, God knows how long he plays. But you had it all in this short period of time. And I think that's really what I take from it is this breadth of experience and how you can carry yourself through highs and lows no matter what you face.
Was your attitude always this positive, or is that something you gained, when you look back at it and with age and wisdom?
I think I had a kernel of the positivity for a very long time. I remember even after this big goal that we scored to put us through to the semifinals in Montreal. I remember the coach at the time, Frank Klopas, he said something that truly resonated with me. It was that the highs are never as high as they think, and neither are the lows. The reality is just somewhere right in the middle. And I think that's really what life is all about, is learning to kind of carry yourself with presence through these highs and lows, to be with them, to experience them. And I think when I was younger, I still got pulled in these moments. I think I always had the positive outlook, but the lows could still really weigh on me. Whereas now, as you go through more of those, you realize like these undulations, that's part of this experience in life, and being able to carry yourself, to be present, to not be overly optimistic or overly pessimistic, just be aware and do the next best thing is really the best way to operate. And I think that's kind of what I've tried to carry with me in all that I do, because whether you're working in business or sports or taking care of your family, it's not all gumdrops and rainbows. And you really just have to be with it day in and day out.
I came across a quote actually yesterday and I reposted it. It's funny you mentioned it now, and it said, when you're winning, don't believe the hype. When you're losing, don't believe the hype. I mean, just to go back to what you said about being level-headed, sometimes we can get carried away and our ego hits and, we think we're all that when we're doing well.
Yeah.
And sometimes if, we're down on ourselves because we're not doing too well, not to dwell on that and to pick yourself up and don't believe the hype either way. I think level-headed is so important in anything you pursue, right?
Yeah, I think that's the groundedness that ultimately leads to amazing outcomes. I think when you look at people that persevere, I think if you look at people who set a vision and achieve it, it's people that remain level-headed. They don't become deluded when they see early success or overly jaded when things get bad. They simply put the next foot in front of the other, and that can happen on an individual level with someone pursuing sports. It can happen on a collective level with a company. And it all comes down to great leadership in the case of those collectives, kind of continuing to beat the drum, keeping the group level-headed and moving forward. And that's something I think in our work with Steel Atlas that we try to do. We, as investors, we hope that we can bring that level-headedness. How can you guide these people? How can you have more experience from being involved in more companies to help people see, as a founder who's so in the weeds, how do you kind of keep your head above the water and keep on swimming, to keep focused on what matters? And it's a really important learning.
Truly. Didier Drogba, you played with him?
I did. And that is an unbelievable person.
And it's come full circle because he owns one of the teams at E1, which is what you're here for.
Yeah, it's every time I come to Saudi Arabia, I feel like it's like the most serendipitous place in the world. So we were at FII. This is how this all happened. But one of our investors, a German man named Christian Angermeyer, an incredibly successful biotech investor, he was there. We were part of showing him around, and we were sitting there before he was going on stage to do a talk, and we're just chatting, and he's like, I've invested in an E1 team, this boat race that's being launched. First race is in Jeddah. I'm doing it with Didier Drogba. I was like, Didier? Like in what world does the one person is an investor in our fund and in my ex-teammate? And it had been 4 years since I'd seen him. We actually played in a Legends game. I don't know how I got the Legend status, but he definitely deserved it and carried enough weight for the two of us. And so we planned to come here for the first race. And what's truly exceptional about Didier is that, yes, he's a great player, but that's like just a fraction of who he is as a person. He is an incredible leader. There's some people where when they receive attention, they don't just take it in and lift themselves up. They turn it into a stage for others. And I think that's everything that Didier did on and off the field. I mean, he ended a civil war in his country. And to this day, he continues to work on things that are really changing the world. And that's part of why he's involved in E1. Like, E1's not just about racing these boats, which literally look like they came out of Star Wars. It's about how do you preserve our oceans? How do you promote the electric motorsports? And that's a big part of why he does it. And it was an incredible event, by the way. Highly recommend going. Hopefully next year you can.
Everyone that went said really good things about it.
Yeah. I mean, I hope people can go see a video. Please go look it up. But the boats are literally a starship that float and fly on the water. And the races are only going to get better and more competitive. I can tell you, like, being there with all the owners, there's already inside drama. I hope there's going to be a Netflix documentary at some point that goes through all the nitty gritty and we can say we were a part of it.
Drama sells.
Yeah, it does. I really hope to spend more time with him because he's an incredible person that is more than just a soccer player.
Yeah, I bet. I'm a Chelsea fan, so Didier Drogba is someone who I followed for many years.
Well, next year we'll have to come back for the race together.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'll be there for sure.
جديد. اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة، ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
I wanted to discuss with you your experience at AlleyCorp.
In part a venture capitalist, but also a venture studio, meaning not only did we just invest in companies, we'd actually take the time to develop our ideas almost like a founder of a company, except in this case, we developed the idea, we'd bring in the founding team and fund the company.
So you took it from nothing to, for example, MongoDB is worth $30 billion today plus.
Yeah.
Business Insider, over $1 billion. You guys took that from nothing to what it is today.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I cannot claim credit for those. Those are really kudos to my first boss and mentor, and this man named Kevin Ryan. And I was very fortunate to get to know him actually while I was still playing soccer in Major League Soccer. But he is truly, I think, one of the most successful entrepreneurs that I wish more people knew. What he's done in New York with AlleyCorp, where you have these ideas and this initiative to start new companies in a place where people thought it was not the place you should build startups, is something that reminds us of what we're doing here at Steel Atlas now. Because New York City is where these companies were getting built, these huge businesses like DoubleClick or MongoDB, when everyone else was building in San Francisco. People thought San Francisco that's the one and done, the be all of tech. And he said, no, New York City has everything it needs to not only meet but exceed what's been done in SF. And I was very fortunate to join there and work there for 4 years under his mentorship. And now as I look at globally what's going on, yes, we have a lot of technology and world-leading talent in the US and Europe. But when we look at the place that's growing in the areas that we want to be investing in and building, it's happening here in Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me so much of looking at SF versus New York. Truly what you want to be doing is investing in lines, not dots. You don't want to invest in something that's here. You want to be investing in something that's moving with massive tailwinds. And that was one of the big things I learned being at AlleyCorp, is that when you're building businesses, when you're making big bets on new technologies, how do you invest in the ecosystems that are going to give you the tailwinds to succeed? And so I feel very fortunate to learn from incredible people like Kevin, to now be able to do that in a different domain.
Do you see Saudi as an undersaturated market for tech business to come in that direction? Like, you see it as a place that is just begging for tech and funding and know-how and all that? I
mean, undersaturated, I think, may be the wrong term, because I think it was this year that now venture capital financing within the kingdom is now the largest in the GCC, surpassing the UAE. And I think when you look at Saudi Arabia, you kind of, I mean, this might be a gross oversimplification, but in the past, the UAE had the money but didn't have the market. Yeah. Egypt had the market but not the money, and Saudi has both. And beyond that, you're combining that with a huge initiative from the government and so much clarity on where they want to take the country and the economy. And when you combine a market with capital and direction, that is an incredible opportunity to participate in. And where we see the opportunity is not that this place is undersaturated, but rather that there's so much growth that's going to happen. How do you make sure that you're bringing all the technologies that can fit into that puzzle, that without those underlying factors in an ecosystem couldn't get deployed? Because building industrial assets is hard, and it takes real commitment. And there's truly not many places in the world where that commitment exists at the same level as here. I mean, just to point to one, You can look at NEOM. They're building the world's largest green hydrogen plant, a 6 billion plus plant. I don't know if there's any place in the world that would commit that much to a new green fuel. And that's the type of thing where we want to find these opportunities and these technologies that can be the next massive plant that puts Saudi Arabia at the forefront of industry, not only to lead this country, but also countries around the world. And that is truly exciting to us.
It's normal for us, but when I hear people say to me that, oh, you guys don't get speeding tickets in papers, you get it on your phone. Government today is paperless, which is pretty cool. The Abshir app is profound. What used to take my dad a trip to the local government office to sign a piece of paper for me to leave the country is now 2 clicks. If I wanted my son, it's kind of like a guardianship.
Yeah.
It's 2 clicks and we're there, and that's like the most simplest thing. I'm talking opening businesses, bank accounts. If I'm not mistaken, everything now is completely digitalized.
I will tell you a story on this. Literally coming here on this trip, I was worried because the day before my flight, I realized that I didn't have a visa because I had forgot. It was a busy period leading up to this. Anywhere else in the world, I don't think I would have made it on this trip.
Yeah.
But it's all online. I applied. Literally next day while I'm at the airport, visa shows up. Smooth flight, arrived, no problem. And that's a testament to these initiatives.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. I mean, we were in a parking garage today. It's tap to pay. Everything is so simple. It's like you're living in the future in these places. I mean, the first place I visited when I arrived in Riyadh was the King Abdullah Financial District.
Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Is it? It's
flawless.
It's truly flawless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost a surreal place to go to. I mean, if you're someone who's a connoisseur of architecture, it's like going to the Museum of the Future. Like it's like there it all is. You've had all these architects building beautiful facilities. What's beautiful about Riyadh, especially when I compare it to, say, Dubai, is that I think you can look at Dubai and you can almost fool yourself into thinking you're in a Western city.
Yeah, I hear that.
Like it's just you get there and I can forget that I've come to the GCC. Whereas when I'm in Riyadh, even though you have these beautiful skyscrapers, I think they pull in touches that is like truly culturally relevant and continues to carry the heritage of the place. And I think so much of it comes to this interaction of shade and how you actually keep stuff cool. And it creates a texture to the city that I don't think you find anywhere, especially in the US where I'm from. And so I think that's like one of my hopes is like Saudi continues to pursue these initiatives and builds these cities, both economic cities, technical cities, that they continue to integrate this heritage with these new technologies and advancements, because I think the integration of the two is really, really, really leading to something beautiful.
I don't think there's anything that excites me right now in terms of projects globally than the line. Really, like I sometimes just think about, I can't wait for it to be done so I can go check out the first module, which I'm told the first 4 kilometers will be done in 2030. But I mean, this thing is 500 meters high, 200 meters wide, and 4 kilometers deep. And that first module was, I don't think we've ever seen a structure like this in history.
I will tell you a crazy stat that I heard at FII this year. I think it was Majid Mufti, who was running the NEOM investment fund, was speaking, and he said that at one point during the construction of the line, they will buy 25% of the world's supply of heavy steel to build this facility.
Wow.
Just think about that.
Wow. And
you start thinking about that at the scale of just the kingdom as a whole, in terms of these industrial initiatives that are happening. And you start to understand how big this is. I think that's, upon my first trip coming here, I think that was one of the big realizations is you can go on Instagram and follow Saudi projects. You can look at the handshaking and everything and the renders. But then until you start seeing this stuff in person, then you start to realize the true scale of this and that it's really happening. There are hundreds of cranes out there. There are 4,500 people already living in NEOM. The whole area is the size of Massachusetts. They expect on its own that area to consume as much power as all of Poland. Like these things are like, that is huge. And then you start to understand why you need to build for the future, why you need new technologies. Because you're truly, like you're describing, you're building something that's never existed before. And it'll take technologies that have never been deployed before. And that is the like imagining of the future that I think gets venture capitalists like myself so excited. That's what you want to be a part of. You want to be a part of making futures like that.
It really makes me laugh when you hear haters saying that they're never going to build it, and then you see satellite pictures of the thing actually penciled into the ground. Like it's no longer just computer generated images. Like there are, I know people in the heavy machinery business, and they have contracts there, and they're earth moving, and the thing is, so the first module, the foundation is done. The thing is going to start rising. And I think that's when people, the naysayers, are going to start scratching their heads and say, shit, these guys are actually doing it.
Yeah. And that's why it takes coming here and talking to people. I think, it's been, one of the things that drew me here is that you live in New York, you interact with a lot of Saudis. I mean, people come to the US, they get their education. And from what I understand, obviously I'm only 30 years old, so I can't go back that far, but there was a time where people, if you were Saudi and you were working in the US, you'd want to stay there. Now all the young people I talk to are like, how do I get back to Saudi? Like that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
And it's because of this, people are starting to understand.
I mean, that sentence was never said in history.
Yeah, like it's unbelievable. I mean, it's like every day in and day out. And it's not just NEOM. It's like we were here and we were visiting a grocery store that's launching called Nawa, which is all local Saudi goods. And it looks like the coolest millennial branded grocery store that you have in New York, but it's focused here. And that's what the opportunity is. There's so many things that can be built. And all the people that went and got educated around the world are now coming back here to do it. I'm wearing glasses that another person, Jamjum Optical, made here and curated all the best glasses. It's like I'm slowly becoming a decked out poster for what the kingdom has to offer. And
it's funny you mentioned that. A lot of the people I know who used to work in London, Dubai, a lot of them went to Dubai. It was the middle ground between. They're all working here. They're either at PIF, they're either at a PIF company, they're either with the family business. But most of them, the subject matter experts, the ones who are really good at what they do, they're in Riyadh.
Yeah. It's unbelievable being in Riyadh because it's the combination of what would happen if New York and DC merged into one. I mean, our firm is based, our office right now is based in New York. I will say we're hopefully going to open up one in Riyadh very soon.
Manhattan.
Yeah, in Manhattan. Yeah. But it's a 5-hour train ride to DC. And there's a lot that you need to do when you're working industrials between the two places. Here, Riyadh can serve as both and more. It's a cultural site. It's really everything all in one. And it makes so much sense that everyone is coming here. And part of what you're describing with this young talent is that not only are these government initiatives pushing people to invest and build and explore new ideas, but also I think much like in the US, we're watching this generational transfer. You have an older generation now, like what we call the boomers in the US, that are kind of handing over the keys to these businesses to the next generation, the decision-making, the investments. And what that means is that you have young people that are thinking about what is the future that I want to live in? What is the future that I want my kids to live in? And they're pushing themselves and they're finding that we need to be in this hub, this center in Riyadh to understand what's going on and then bring that to wherever we're from. And I think it's a truly exciting time to be in the conversation with those folks and figuring out how do you support those initiatives. I think there's a quote from MBS where he says that time is our enemy. It's nothing else. It's like the Dubai did this. It's our turn to not only catch up but exceed what's been done, because like we've been discussing before, this is a place that has everything working for it and everything moving in the right direction. When I look at the growth of the U.S. economy and even around the world, there's two things that are highly correlated with growth in GDP. One is energy. How much energy can you consume and do you have access to? And the other, which Saudi is accelerating so quickly on, is women's labor force participation rates. When you bring women into the workforce, it brings so much energy to the economy. And now you have a place where I think Saudi Arabia has far exceeded India, the world's largest democracy, with women's labor force participation. I think we were going to potentially talk about the tennis tournament, but it's changing, and it's changing so fast, and it's progressing so quickly in so many touch points. And I think it's making it a place people want to be and want to participate in. And I think progress and prosperity is what's being signaled here. Her Royal Highness Princess Rima's letter outlined the numbers pretty clearly.
That letter was just boss.
300,000 startups run by women, 25% of all SMEs.
It's amazing.
I mean, that's an unbelievable
I thought you were going to talk about the letter that she wrote regarding the WTA.
It was in that letter.
Oh, was it in that?
Yeah, it was quoted in that letter, which is unbelievable.
Can we just talk about the WTA? You know, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You guys are accusing us, and it really bothers me, this point, of not having inclusivity or women's rights. If any one of them came to Saudi to see what it's like, they would go back on their word. And them choosing or them saying, no, we won't participate, you are creating a problem that doesn't exist. You know, by virtue of you not participating, you are doing exactly what you are saying that we are. Yeah. And it was such a great letter, and it was just so heartfelt.
Yeah.
You know,
I think she's an incredible representative of the kingdom. And I think that's one of the things that I hope more people are able to do, is actually come here and visit and see and interact and understand that so much is changing so quickly, and that it's not what the Western perception is. And I think there's a true, I mean, I hope, and honestly, even being on this podcast, that you can start to share this message with a wider audience to bridge that gap. Because, I mean, one of the people that inspired me to come here is a woman named Muna Al-Subay, who works in venture capital in New York at one of the world's top funds, and now is a partner at another one. And she's a representative of what Saudi women have to offer and what they're doing, not only within the kingdom, but around the world. And so my hope is to continue to help be a part of that, to see that grow and see it flourish, because I really do think it's going to be one of the driving forces that continues to push Saudi onto the global stage, is continuing to lift women up, to see this progress, to make sure that, yeah, like you have sporting events here. Because like I was a young boy watching the Columbus Crew, a newly started league, play in my hometown. If you see a female tennis player playing in your hometown, it inspires you to push yourself to hopefully become like them.
Yeah.
That's how we break through ceilings. And
we have one. We have a very, very talented Saudi tennis player. I think she's 19 now. I had her on 2 years ago when she was 17. And her dream then was to make WTA. Yara Al-Habbani. And like, if you would have told me a couple of years ago that a Saudi female tennis player will play at a WTA event, and she's knocking on the door. She's knocking on that door. Steel Atlas, I just want to get into that. What initially led you to start that, and what verticals are you currently working on?
Yeah. So I had spent several years at AlleyCorp, and we had been a part of growing this firm from a small team of 4 people to a team where I think when I left, we had 50 engineers just on staff for the companies that we built. And we were doing everything from healthcare to industrials. We'd become a real center of gravity in the New York ecosystem. And over that time, I developed a real taste for and like for investing in industrials. And that's where I really wanted to focus my efforts. And as I was looking out on the landscape and the world as a whole, I was seeing where public support was going to support what I thought was the future of not only the U.S., but places around the world. I felt that for the last 20 to 30 years, venture capital was going to fund software and apps and newly branded dog foods. And not to say that any of these things were bad, but when you look at what venture capital was, it was building the next set of chips. It was building the literal things that made the future possible. And I think that the industry and hardware had stagnated. And I wanted to be a part of bringing venture capital back to its roots and finding the places where that's possible. So when I left AlleyCorp, it was explicitly with that goal: is how do you find a way to fund these technologies that is going to make the world I want to live in exist? And it's not just digital technologies. It's not the next software app, the next productivity app. It's new ways of producing energy. It's new ways of manufacturing goods. It's new ways of mining. It's new ways of constructing buildings. It's new ways of organizing our massively global supply chain. And so when we were building and conceiving Steel Atlas, it was exactly with that in mind. It's how do you find ways to bring the technologies in those verticals to fruition, not only for the US, not only for Saudi, but hopefully for the world as a whole. Because once again, to go back to like the simplest things that correlate with progress is prosperity. And the biggest correlate with prosperity, when you look at a chart, is energy. And so all the things that lead to increasing energy levels, increasing energy efficiency, giving us the resource and the manufacturing capability to capitalize on those improvements is really where we want to be spending our time. And so that was the inspiration for the firm. And we're lucky to be a year in and already seeing tangible progress towards those goals.
Yeah. We touched on pre-commercialization on the phone. Why do you specifically focus on that, and also tell us what on earth that is?
Yeah. So what we mean by pre-commercialization technologies and why we invest in those is we invest in technologies where the founder has likely built something. They're in the early stages of R&D, but they haven't necessarily sold to their first client or customer en masse. So maybe they haven't built their first large-scale facility, or they haven't distributed their product to their first 2,000 customers or something along those lines. Why we do that is that we see an incredible opportunity to be part of the value creation that occurs when you commercialize a technology. So it de-risks the business massively when you go from having 0 customers to your first customer. And so where we position ourselves as a fund is we try to find technologies where we, given our relationships that we've developed and built, especially here in Saudi Arabia, we know if we identify the right technology, we can bring it to those partners because we know their problems, we know where they're trying to grow, and through partnerships with them, we can be that first customer. And so when we bring a company to the Middle East and Saudi Arabia in particular, we identify it and we do it with a customer in mind. And when that company has that first customer or joint venture, we see the appreciation and value not only for ourselves and for the business, but for the shareholders that invest in our fund. And so that's really what it's all about, is how do we help accelerate the growth of these businesses that we invest in?
And is Saudi, like as an ecosystem, is it different to what you're used to?
I mean, one thing that makes it different is that the clarity of what they want and where they're trying to take things, that's a very clear difference. The other is that you're working with a different set of opportunities. So you have a lot of IP and talent and technology in specific industries that are different from the talent base in, say, the U.S., where we have a lot of software-based talent, a lot of like expertise in venture capital financing, but not necessarily on the hard asset side of things. Things get built in Saudi Arabia far quicker than they get built in the U.S. And so what we try to do is we try to say, how do we find and identify and merge those two talents to hopefully deliver on these visions quicker? And I think over time, the beauty of just being in a place where things are growing and changing so fast, where part of the goals from the government initiatives around localization are to kind of educate and up-level the local population to build these things, is that it's going to get easier and easier over time. So being a part of it in the early days equips you with the skill set to do it even better in the future.
There's just this drive to be at the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's so many initiatives that are happening that are pushing things to the forefront. I mean, we look at maybe like one of the most important things for Saudi Arabia, which is desalination. Like the kingdom is the only, I think, country in the world that doesn't have a surface level freshwater river.
Yeah, how about that?
20% of the world's desalinated water is produced here in the kingdom.
20% of the world?
The world's. If you look at power consumption on a country level, Saudi Arabia consumes as much power as Russia, but is 5 times smaller. And so you start to look at some of these challenges, and there are challenges unless you treat them like opportunities. Because what the opportunity is to say, how do you take this truly critical industrial process, and how do you turn it into something that pushes you to invest in renewable and clean energies to power those facilities instead of relying on oil? How do you figure out how to run and turn the waste products that come out of desalination facilities, namely the brine that's filled with these salts, with minerals that can be used to make batteries and critical electronic technologies? How do you take the most advanced extraction technologies and deploy them here? And those are exactly the initiatives that are getting supported. So yes, it comes from this forward-looking vision, but also these challenges that are being turned into opportunities. And I think when you have the intersection of the two and the desire and push from the government and private sector to make things happen, there is truly, truly incredible things that are going to get built here, whether it's in communications or desalination or batteries. It kind of runs the gamut.
Have you worked with any of the ministries?
So we're in the beginning of kind of conversations and working with a number of different ministries, but also initiatives. One of them that we're incredibly excited about, hopefully, actually this is part of our visit to Riyadh, is the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, which it's going to sound surprising, but the test reactor, so the nuclear reactor that you have here in Saudi, is actually under that as opposed to the Ministry of Energy. And so we're incredibly excited to explore what it would look like to bring new types of energy systems to the kingdom. And so that requires interaction and engagement at the government level. And we've also had communications with KAUST about the IP that's been developed in conjunction with all the work in R&D that Aramco's done to figure out how do you take this stuff that's currently sitting in these research institutions and how do you use learnings like what we developed at AlleyCorp for building businesses in New York and apply them to these pools of IP that you have sitting at these facilities that are at the cutting edge in many areas. I mean, we were talking to them about one of the challenges you have with deploying solar panels here that people might not think about is that, yeah, it's great you can build a solar panel and it produces energy at a very low marginal cost. But one of the challenges is that dust. So every day dust will start showing up on the panels. And then if there's a storm, then you're going to have a lot of dust. And so you need to figure out how do you you can't use water to just go clean these. It defeats the whole purpose.
So the dust stopped the panels from...
Yeah. I mean, I forget the exact numbers, but I think with a sandstorm, functionally over the course of the storm, the production of these panels can drop to 60% below what their baseload power is. And I think maybe even day by day, it's something like 1% per day if you don't clean them. And so it's a very difficult problem. And the solution is actually developing robots that can go and clean these panels in an automated way. But this is the type of IP that these constraints push you to develop. And those solutions are not only going to be deployed here, but potentially around the world in places and geographies that face these same problems. But being at the forefront and solving these hard problems ends up leading you to developing and commercializing technologies that have huge, huge applications.
Nuclear is, like when you said it, I got scared. It's heavily stigmatized. There are obviously good ways to use it and threatening ways to use it. What kind of touch points do you have with the industry?
Yeah, so as a firm, one of our more recent investments was in a nuclear infrastructure company. And I say infrastructure because it's really not just about a reactor. It's about how do you build this technology in a way that aligns with what civilian nuclear should be all about. So not military applications. And the first thing, if you're going to pursue this, is how do you make a system that's non-proliferant, meaning you can't make a bomb out of it?
Yeah.
Because this is really the core problem with nuclear is that it's perceived both as something that is a military tool and as something that's not safe. People look at nuclear waste and they see something that they truly don't want in your backyard for good reason. And so the question becomes can you get the benefits of nuclear energy? Which nuclear is truly the best way to produce clean baseload power. That's why we saw at COP28, countries committing to tripling their nuclear power output. And so when we were going and looking across the world, we found a technology and a company that's delivering on exactly those ambitions. So it's non-proliferant, so you can't make bombs out of it. So you get around this huge issue that really prevents it from being a solution around the world. It's also subcritical, which means that it's safe. You can't have a situation like Fukushima or Chernobyl, these things that created a black eye on the industry as a whole and led to Japan shutting down their nuclear industry. It's now finally coming back. And then you have waste. And so you need a system that doesn't produce the amount of waste, or maybe even the best case burns it. And so when we found this company, Transmutex, that's delivering on all these fronts, we said, okay, here's something that is a new nuclear that is built for civilian applications, that is built to actually power the future in a way that provides clean baseload power, the type of baseload power that you would need to run a large-scale desalination facility. Because unlike other renewable energies, or clean energies rather, it's not intermittent. And that's one of the big challenges relying on solar or wind. You have it during the day when it's sunny, but then at night it drops down. When the wind's not blowing, it's not working. If you're running an industrial process, it's very difficult. You imagine you're running a facility making, say, cups. If every time the wind stops blowing, you can't make cups, it's a very hard business to run. We're actually seeing the effects of this in Germany. Germany had a very strong policy for deploying renewables at scale. They also went through a process of decommissioning their reactors because of some of these issues that we talked about, especially around waste and safety. Now, because of that leading to unpredictable power prices, it's meaning that industry is not wanting to invest in Germany. So their industrial output hasn't recovered to pre-COVID levels, especially when you compare it to countries around them where they have, and they're making those commitments to this future of energy. And so part of our hope is that we can start taking the baby steps towards figuring out how do you bring nuclear into the future in a way that gets past the issues of the past, where it was associated with bombs and waste and radioactivity, and making it something that really delivers on that potential. And so that's a lot of what our work is.
Can it substitute the traditional way of how we desalinate?
Yeah, so it doesn't actually even have to substitute the way we desalinate, but it can substitute the way you power desalination, which is key. Because I think if we look at Saudi Arabia as a whole, I mean, one of the things that's incredible about the kingdom is that you can produce oil incredibly cheaply, basically an order of magnitude more cheaply than any place in the world. But the oil that ends up being consumed domestically means foregoing on the profit that you could get from selling it abroad at $80 plus per barrel. And so if you look at the kingdom, it's also one of the places with an incredibly fast population growth rate, one of the few places in the world that's growing so fast. In the next 25 years, it could very easily double in size. And you start looking at that and you're like, wow, we're going to need a lot of desalination facilities. And there's pretty much two paths to solving making sure those desalination facilities don't consume more and more oil. One is making them more efficient. The other is figuring out what type of power supplies exist to cleanly power those facilities that are not running on oil. And because you need them to run 24/7, solar is a very difficult solution. Same way with wind. Nuclear and solutions like it are truly a pathway to getting the best of this world. And it's a way to deliver on making sure the kingdom can continue to be prosperous as it grows and continues to grow over the next 20 years.
Question for you is, with all, I mean, you touched on how, nuclear, you have two sides of the coin for nuclear. You have the one that is used for military reasons and used for non-military reasons. Where do you see Saudi benefiting from nuclear technologies? And how could it be an asset or a technology that's important for the country, tying sustainability into that as well? Sorry, there's a lot of moving parts in that question.
No, it's a great question. And it's an important question, not only for Saudi, but for any country around the world. Because countries around the world are making big commitments. They're committing to net zero energy by 2050. And I think the equation to getting there is actually pretty simple. It's that when you look at the technologies we're currently using outside of nuclear, they're just not going to get us to those goals. Not only because of the problems with intermittency, where we don't have power 24/7 with solar or wind, but simply because the energy density of these technologies is not high enough to power all the processes and the people and the ambitions. The world's not going backwards, it's going forwards. We're going to build more industrial processes, we're going to build bigger cities, and we need to figure out how to power that in a sustainable way. And so when I look at Saudi and its relationship to nuclear, I see an opportunity for Saudi to become a leader in the future of civilian nuclear that can't be used to make bombs, nuclear that doesn't produce waste. And even more importantly, I see an opportunity for Saudi to start adopting some of these cutting-edge technologies that positions it to be the world leader in what may be the next generation of energy. Because some of these systems, like the one we work with, are actually capable of producing fuel. So right now, this is one of the crazy facts I think most people don't know. But the US runs a nuclear reactor fleet that runs on uranium-235, so enriched uranium. The only place that the US doesn't currently have sanctions on Russia is for the purchase of enriched uranium. Every country in the world is reliant on Russia and Kazakhstan for this fuel, this potential fuel of the future. Now, there's other technologies that can turn abundant elements like thorium into a fuel for nuclear reactors. And if Saudi takes the leadership role in adopting and building these systems that can turn thorium-232 into uranium-233, all of a sudden you can imagine a world where, beyond oil, 100 years from now, Saudi's the exporter of this new clean nuclear fuel that's powering plants all across the global south, delivering on a new vision for OPEC. And I think that's incredibly compelling. And I think that's what it means to be investing in the future. And that's why it's so exciting to work here and have those conversations. Because like we've talked about before, this is the place where people are willing to invest in the future in a very bold way.
What do you see as being the fuel of the future?
I think it's very likely that we live in a world with multiple types of energy production, because one of the beauties of solar is that once you get a plant up and running or a field of solar arrays, the marginal cost of the energy produced is quite low, close to zero, because there's no inputs. But the problem is you don't have power 24/7. And so it means it can't be your baseload power. So that power that's always there when people need it. When you flip the switch, you need to know that you have power. And when you're running a grid, you always have to balance power supply and demand. So when you have sources of power that fluctuate, it's very difficult to manage these grids. This is why you've seen blackouts in places like Texas. And so what nuclear allows you to do is it allows you to produce energy in a very predictable way. And so when you look at the future of energy, it's a future where nuclear exists, whether that's fission today or fusion tomorrow, because that's the way we get predictable baseload power that allows people to run the factory they need. It allows people to run the desalination plants. It allows people to turn on their AC and get cooling. And if you can't do that in a reliable way, that's not good. That's what leads to situations like Germany's been facing.
Which is
that because their power and power grid and the grid has been so reliant on renewables and coal and natural gas from Russia in the past, that all of a sudden you don't have predictability in what the price of power is going to be in the future. And when you don't have a predictable and reliable source of baseload power, it disincentivizes investment. People go elsewhere. People go to places where they know I'm going to be able to get energy when I need it to make something for my family, for whatever it is. And so I think if we want to live in a world that's more abundant than it is today, with more prosperity, then we need more energy dense, but also solutions that get around some of the issues with emissions and things like that. And nuclear is the clear solution there.
Do you think with oil, do you think that we will still be needing it while it's still around, or will obsolete come first?
I think we're going to need oil, and I don't think oil as an energy solution is the end of oil. I think there's also oil for products. We were visiting a company that builds materials and does construction, and they're working with other companies to actually turn oil into physical goods. So you can imagine petrochemical lampposts and other things like that. And so there's so many places where you can turn this asset into valuable products that even if we imagined a world that I think is very far off, where oil is not a part of the energy mix, there's still going to be applications for this valuable raw material. And I also think when you look realistically at the evolution of the world, it's very likely as countries develop, like we're still going to use oil as an energy source until we have very robust alternatives, which we are still in the early days of deploying. And that's going to take decades.
You know, it's funny, people think that cars consume 90% of the oil emissions of the world. It's actually the opposite. It's about 10%, and 90% is in miscellaneous, non-cars, factories, building of products. The world is heavily reliant on oil outside of the automobile sector, with EV replacing or potentially replacing the combustion engine. Do you see that being actualized as soon as people think it is? Like within 5 years, 80% of global cars will be EV, or is it going to take a little bit longer?
It's definitely going to take longer. I think it's optimistic to believe we'll get EVs that quickly, in part because they're actually incredibly difficult to manufacture today, not necessarily from a technology standpoint, but from an access to other resources. In the US, we have a thing called the critical minerals list. It's 35 minerals that are integral to core technologies like batteries that are used in EVs that right now get sourced primarily from other countries, which means you have a lot of supply chain risk. The most well-known that's as it relates to EVs is lithium, nickel, and cobalt are in that list. And when you're relying on another country that views batteries as a critical point of their infrastructure, not only for EVs, but also for solar power. If you're running solar power and you want to turn it into a 24/7 power source, you need to pair it with big grid-scale batteries. So during the day, you collect a lot of sun, you store half of it in a battery, and that powers you the rest of the night. And if we try to imagine a world where we're making that many batteries, we need solutions that countries can produce at home. And this is also one of the initiatives that Saudi's pursuing and that we're very interested in is how do you take local minerals and resources and turn them into these batteries of the future? So instead of using lithium, maybe using something like potassium, which, getting back to NEOM and the Sinai, it sits on a large potash deposit. And so if we wanted to build local batteries here in the kingdom, you'd say that is really where the potential is. It's to look where you are today, to work with your local assets, just like oil, and turn those into the valuable technologies of the future.
I remember in COVID, there was a lot of disruption in raw materials and in products coming out of China, which I think is where the batteries are made for Tesla, to Tesla, and that probably disrupted their production lines.
Yeah, global supply chains are a real risk.
Real risk.
And it doesn't even have to be disruptions to the supply chain, but also geopolitical decisions. China can start to decide that because of the tit-for-tat policies on export and import controls, that they're not going to export the minerals or refined lithium for making batteries to the U.S. So that's a real risk. And they can do that for any country around the world, just like any other country has the right to do as a sovereign nation. And so for any country, when you look at these critical technologies, they have to ask, how do we have a sovereign supply? From everything from simple masks during a pandemic to batteries. And I think that Saudi and the U.S. have massive initiatives to pursue this. In the U.S., we call it the Inflation Reduction Act. In Saudi, it's all a part of Vision 2030. And I think both of these policies are really indicating, how do you make a resilient economy of the future? How do you become self-sufficient in these core technologies that are going to power our economies, whether it's batteries for solar or batteries for cars, or even just the chips we manufacture? And so all of these are critical questions for people that are operating at the highest levels.
Honestly, Cameron, before we started shooting, I told you that I was shocked that you're only 30 years old, because the information you have is pretty incredible. Mm. If I was to ask you, throughout your career, what was your favorite failure, or a failure that we're getting personal now, a failure that you learned the most from, that molded you to be the person you are today? Is there one that you can single out?
Oh, for sure. There's it was part of my time at AlleyCorp. Like we discussed before, the primary goal of AlleyCorp was to start and build new businesses. And when you're doing that, someone has to lead those companies. And I was very fortunate that Kevin, my boss, decided that I should be one of those people. And I really wanted to. I really believed that I wanted to lead one of these businesses. And it turned out that I failed running the business. We operated for about a year and a half. We grew very quickly at the beginning of the COVID, growing from 0 to 20 people at an incredible rate. But we realized that the product we built just wasn't going to sell, or it was going to be too costly to sell, and we were running into all these issues. And the process of having this realization, and then the process of having to go to and lay off every single person that you just brought on and told that you were building the future together, and say that I failed, it literally made me depressed. Wow. And it was the hardest period of my life. I remember walking into the office to tell Kevin this, and I mean, this is why he's one of the people I look up to most, is that he gave me the most grace and mercy in that moment. He said, Cameron, it's okay. Like, I'll take care of this. And it was in that moment that, I mean, it's still like, it gives me tingles on my body today to think of the amount of like gratitude that I have for it, because that period of time where I had to reconcile with all these ideas about what I thought I wanted. I thought I was becoming the person I wanted to be, the CEO of a venture capital backed company with millions of dollars, hiring all these people. Like that's this like vision and archetype. And then to have that reality like pulled from you, and then had to reflect and say,
it's heavy. Yeah.
What happened? And then to realize, I think, through that process that, look, like there's things that are in your control. There's things that are outside of your control. And going back to what we talked about with sports, the highs are higher than they look, and the lows may be too. And that really what I wish, if I could go back to those moments, is actually not to be on that roller coaster riding it, but being able to be a part of that, to be present with it, because ultimately it was a very human experience. Laying something off, ending a journey is as much a part of starting it as anything else. Anything that starts has to end. And I was so disconnected because I was so hurt and affected from an ego level that I couldn't be there as my full self during that whole thing. And it really informed how now I not only carry myself and what I expect and how I prepare in the endeavors I go in, but also how when I interact with founders who are facing these challenges, how you can engage them with real empathy, because you've seen the pain. When you sell a vision to someone and you really believe you're building the future together, and then you have to say, no, I didn't achieve that. It takes a lot of humility, whether you have it or have to learn it. And so that was truly a failure that I learned the most from, and really has molded how I carry myself today.
Would you go back and want to change anything that you've been through I'm thinking the injury, a lot of learnings came from it. The butterfly effect. You change one thing, maybe if the future or the success that you've seen since doesn't pan out that way. But is there something that you would change if you can go back and do it again?
I don't know if I'd actually change the specific moment itself, but I think I'd actually change how I carried myself in it. Like I think that one thing as I've gotten older that I've realized is that through the good and bad, you can either try to, through the struggles, pull yourself out of it and act like it's not happening to try to imagine a better future. Or you can really be there and you can sit in it and you can be present. And in spite of the struggle, you can carry yourself with grace and awareness. And I wish I could even go back to those other moments where I faced challenges like this injury. Really just not wish for the future, but be in the pain, be in the pleasure, be in the little victories, even just bending my knee a little bit more each day and succeeding and realizing that's what it's all about. Big or small, the little success that we have, the little failures, that's how we learn, that's how we become more human. Because when you look back, like I think like you're saying, one thing changes everything. If I didn't have this injury, I may still be playing professional sports. I may just be another guy in Major League Soccer. As much as I love kicking a ball around, that's probably what I'd be doing. And instead, I had the highs and lows of pro sports, and now I'm on an entirely new adventure in a place where, if you asked me as a kid, I don't think I could tell you where Saudi Arabia was as a young boy growing up in the middle of nowhere, Dayton, Ohio. And now look where it is. And I think that's the inspiring part, is that when you look forward, you have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. And the dots only connect looking backwards. And that's the beauty of life.
It's almost like you were given two exceptional life experiences that typically people only experience one of them. I mean, to play, I just have to go back to it because I know what kind of dedication goes into making it as a pro. And I know how much the professional, I'm a sports guy. I admire professionals in any sports. It could be darts for all I care. If you operate on a level that you practice it professionally, I salute you for that. And I will admire your craft. And I see how much professionals love the sport they play. And that's why I keep going back to that, maybe because it resonates with me. And I just want to know, like, how difficult was it to leave it, or was it a case of when one door closes, another one opens? Because you kind of live both sides of the coin here.
Yeah, I feel I had a unique experience even while I was playing, where I had a lot of the feelings you're just describing, where when I was playing pro sports, it was this incredible combination of what my dad taught me. It's work hard and have fun, to carry yourself and push yourself every day, but always remember that it's the joy of what you do that's going to carry you farthest. And I think that's when you look at the great players, is they have this joy about what they do. And for me, that's always been there with soccer and been the main driver. But alongside that, there's other things in life that can bring you great joy. I was very fortunate that even while I was playing, I think, I don't know if I believe it was the case, but I think I was the only pro athlete also hired by the front office as an employee there. In the case of Major League Soccer, I was actually working as an engineer and on the data science side, helping use the statistical data to make player pricing models. So I was sitting on both sides of the model, or the business, and in some ways it was like I put on the glasses and I'm the dorky engineer. You take off the glasses and you're the pro athlete. And so you're living in these two worlds and seeing. I think you also learned that the way you see the world isn't the only way to see it. Like the way you looked at yourself as a pro athlete. You're like, I'm the star, I'm the guy. Then you go look at from the front office, and they're like, there's a bunch of guys who think they're the star, and they're all figuring out how to allocate these people, like make it the league overall good. They care about your story, but it's much more different. There's a bigger picture there, and you start to take these lessons and you carry them into different contexts, and you realize like there's so many adventures you can have in the world, where whether it's pro sports or business, like you can work hard and have fun, and that's really what I hope to do in everything.
Yeah. You definitely will touch a lot more. I mean, who am I to say? But with what you're doing today, I feel like the influence and the people who can benefit from what you are doing today, I would imagine exceeds pro sports. So this.
I mean, I was no Messi or Drogba, so.
But you played with Drogba, which is
that's cool.
Very impressive. Mentors, you keep mentioning Kevin Ryan a lot. would he be, not to lead the witness, would he be one of your mentors?
Yeah, he absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he
was a good guess.
Yeah, very, very good guess. I mean, I truly wish like so many people get to know his story and who he is and how he carries himself, because he's done so much for so many. And I think one of the things that's most impressive about him is that, I mean, he's as successful as they can be. But when he's with you and interacting with you, he is with you and interacting with you. And he brings true joy to everything he does. I actually like can't remember a time where he showed up in our office with like an angry face or a frown. Like he woke up every day with that joy and that energy. And even to this day where he's had all the success in the world, he shows up and he gives it his all. It was the same thing with Didier. These people who have a passion about what they're doing and why they're doing it and how what they do energizes them and energizes and gives back to the people around them. For Didier, that's the Côte d'Ivoire and Africa as a whole. For Kevin, that's New York and the US. And I think for us, like it's hopefully bridging these two countries, realizing what opportunities can emerge by working at the intersection of them.
It's so refreshing to hear Didier Drogba being referenced in a environment away from football. And, you know, we see athletes as just that, and we forget that they're humans.
Yeah.
You know, and here you are telling us about all the stuff that he does that not many might know about outside of the world of football. I mean, he said that he stopped the civil war.
Yeah.
Can you just
there's
talk about that?
Yeah, there's few people I think in the world that have the level of influence that he had and the presence to do what he did. But he stood up and he said that I would not play in the World Cup unless the leaders of his country of Côte d'Ivoire came to an agreement to end what was happening. And that's someone who I think is using their platform for really true good. It's so selfless. He had no need. And I think it was at a time before, I think sports today has entered the public sphere in a different way. This was before that. He was so far ahead of his time. And I think that's why he's viewed as not only a symbol of sport, but so much more, not only in the Côte d'Ivoire, but Africa and around the world. That's why he's like, I truly believe an ambassador for what the best of sport has to offer.
Yeah, he's really one of the greatest, and did so well at Chelsea. I mean, that header at Champions League final.
I will tell you,
that moment.
There was a day at training where he was after practice, hard session, and just the level of skill this man had. He was showing me how he could take corners. So normally if you're taking a corner from, say, the left-hand side, you might curl it in to shoot it at goal, curl it in with the left side of your foot, inside of the foot this way. He's like, watch this. He takes it with the inside of his right foot and curves it the opposite direction into the goal. The amount of control.
Wait. So right foot, right side.
So watch. So this would be, so normally if I'm the left footer, I would kick the ball here, curl it in, inside of my left foot. What he did was take his right foot, hit it inside of his right foot like this with his heel.
Curled left to right?
Yeah. And it's just like the amount of understanding.
Shouldn't happen.
No, it's just like you watch it happen and it breaks your model of like how the world works.
The physics, laws of physics.
But yeah, and I think that's what I hope people can realize about athletes is that they have an awareness of their body and what's capable that's just as amazing as like a physicist's awareness of how a system works and how you can model and shape particles to get things done. It's like all these different forms of knowledge are beautiful in their own ways. And I think I hope and I think it often takes people playing sports to really appreciate it, but there's so much subtlety in every sport, and the people that are at the pinnacle of what they do, you really can learn so much from watching them execute at their craft because the way they do it is just different. They think different, they feel different, and it's all intuitive. They've engraved these things. There's an incredible video of Ronaldo that I think people should watch, but they're basically testing his performance, and they're doing it in a warehouse. And one of the tests they do is they take a corner and they see if he can head the ball in and how many he hits. And then they take a corner, and while the ball's in the air, they turn off the lights.
Oh, wow.
And he still can find the ball in.
Oh, wow. And then with night vision, you can see what he did?
Yes. It's because his awareness, he has a perfect model of what's going on. He doesn't need his eyes. There's so much more information and context. And Didier was the same way. He could see where someone was going, see what they were intending to do, and then he could leave that, focus his attention on the defender in front of him, navigate a position, because he knows, because of the team and the work you do, that the ball is going to be coming in the air. And as soon as it shows up, boom, it's a goal.
That's how he got the goal in 2012.
Same thing. And you can see him. You can see him look for the cross, follow the guy, and then he looks at the guy and he's like, okay, this is the next problem to solve. Full awareness of what's going on here. And that's what these great players do. This is why you see Ronaldinho making no-look passes. Because the eyes are like, that's the first part. You gather information, you create a model, and then you execute. And you don't need to be looking over here to know you need to play it over there. And watching these world-class people do that at the highest level is truly something that I hope most people can appreciate.
You're right, by the way. I've noticed that when free kicks are taken, they don't look at the goal. They know where the goal is. They're focusing on the connection and how they're... And Ronaldo does it a lot. He looks at the ball and he keeps looking even after he follows through with the swing because he knows where the goal is. Yeah. That's a crazy bit of awareness that you need to have.
Yeah. And I think, look, it's not just sports. Like, this is what great business people do. When you sit in a room with someone who's a real leader, they have awareness of every single person around the table. They know what their incentives are, their goals, their motivations. And when they sit there and they're doing their best, they understand how to play the room in a way that makes sure you bring people together and move things forward. And you start seeing these things play out in different domains, and you realize, look, whether you're doing sports or business or art, it's not so different. And that if you take the time to look and appreciate these different things, there's lessons to be learned everywhere.
What makes you feel like the most alive? What experiences? I know it's broad, but...
I will tell you, and it may be a disappointing answer for some, but actually just sitting quietly, peacefully in my room.
Meditation,
yeah. I feel most connected to the world, and at times it's not easy, but at other times it's where I truly feel the most alive.
How long per day would you do that? You've been building up?
Yeah, it's always been something, honestly, from my grandma and grandpa in particular, that they instilled in me. Spirituality was at the forefront of their lives, especially after they retired. And the meditation cushions that I use in my home are ones that were hand sewed by my grandma. That was her gift to me. And actually, it's funny because when she initially gave them, I didn't even use them to meditate. I used it as like a laptop stand. And so sometimes it takes time for the ideas to filter in. And the message can be out there, and you're just not receiving it. But now, I wake up each morning and I spend 30 minutes to an hour sitting and try to do the same before I go to bed. And you take a moment and you connect with whatever is higher for you, and it really puts you in a place that I think is different. And you realize you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that you can hope that throughout your day you're acting from that place and not the ego up here, but something that's connected to what's unfolding all around you. And meditation is what makes me most capable of doing that day in and day out.
Did you ever think of what you would want to be remembered for?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. A good guy, a great time, and the first person you ask for help. That would be, if I could have that written on the grave at the end, I'd be like, okay, I did a fine job.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
It must really mean a lot to you when people reach out to you and be like, Cameron, we need you on this, whether it's personal or business related.
Yeah. No, it does. One of the things that truly gives me the most joy in life is helping people, yes, but also being in positions, whether it's speaking on a podcast or helping someone out, where I feel like it can be a part of maybe nudging people to go, just follow their heart, trust the story, what you've done with this podcast in just 2 years. It's the perfect example. 3 years, sorry. But you took steps into the unknown, and you just said, yes, this feels right, this feels right, this feels right. And a lot of people, we all are, and I've had these moments, are so afraid to take that first step, and they don't know if the world's going to catch them. And I think more often than not, it does. And when it doesn't, the lessons you learn are what set you up for the next step. And just being willing to do that, and for me, having opportunities to speak or connect, or even the people we invest in, to make the little push or the nudge to say, I think it's going to be okay. I think you can go and do that. That is the thing that gives me the most joy in life.
Yeah. Reminded me of a screenshot I took the other day of a friend of mine who posted it on his Instagram, Rhett Taylor. He, I love it. He sends every Monday, these email shots. There's a picture of Will Smith. He said, God placed all the best things in life on the other side of fear. And it's true.
Yeah.
And it's true, because I was so unhappy before I took a risk and I mustered up the courage to do this. It's very unhappy. And then got a bit of traction, and now I really enjoy what I do.
I mean,
in many ways, more ways than one.
There's a great book that's, I think, mostly totally under the radar because it was written by two computer scientists from the University of Florida. It's called Why Greatness Can't Be Planned, the Myth of the Objective. And it looks at this idea that, I mean, they're AI researchers, and they're looking at like, okay, how do you make an algorithm that's intelligent? And this was many, many years ago. And one thing they realized is that if you want great outcomes, there's actually no heuristic, no formula for greatness, because it's pretty simple. If there was a formula for greatness, people would follow it, and it wouldn't be great anymore. So truly the only way to do something great, and it doesn't guarantee that it will be, but the only potential for it is to step into the unknown, to step off the ledge and believe there's another step, to walk into the foggy lake. And I think that's what you did.
Into the uncharted
territory. And then you feel around, you trust. You look there and you let the fear, you hold it. And eventually you start to see, oh, wow, there is light at the end of this. The fog starts to clear and you're totally on your own. Realize I am the voice of this space. I'm the voice of a place, a kingdom, like all these things. Like that is an incredible, incredible opportunity. And I think that more people have that in them, but it's very, very hard to take that first step, especially if you don't have the people around you saying, I'm here with you, like we'll support you. And I think we all can be that for our friends, our family, and beyond.
Is it the fear of criticism that makes people not want to?
I think criticism is one, but I think our egos were very afraid of being judged and feeling ashamed, feeling not worthy. If people support us in what we do, or if we step outside what's normal, all these things, we want to feel worthy. And so when things don't work out the way we expect, or whatever it may be, it's very, very scary, because it also forces us to reassess, like, what are we capable of? What can we actually do? And one thing I think you realize as you take more of these steps, takes more of these risks, is that every person that's gotten everywhere did so by taking little steps and failures and learning. And through these failures, I really believe it's the only way you learn. You start to learn like, oh, this is how reality works. When you do this, this happens. And books can't teach you all that. You kind of got to get out there and get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
One of my favorite little mental models is this idea is that oftentimes we think we know things, but we actually don't. It's almost like blind people trying to describe the color blue. It's like they actually, if you haven't done the thing, if you haven't gone out there and tried to make a podcast, you actually don't know anything about making a podcast. Like I could read a blog post about it and I could say, oh yeah, I know these things, but I know nothing that you know simply by doing these episodes. And I think more people, if they realize that you just push yourself out there, you'll learn the color blue too. And you'll be able to do what all these other people have done. I think it's one of the great Steve Jobs quotes that the world was made by people no smarter than you. And I really, really believe that. I think maybe the only difference is that the world was made by people that took that first step. And so that's what's on us to do is have the faith, take the first step, and see where you land.
It's everything. If you want to build greatness, don't expect that road to be busy with others. It's typically a lonely road. They say it's lonely at the top. Yeah. And if you can be okay with loneliness and working without people's support, I think that it can take you far in life.
Yeah, I think you have to be willing to make the first choice of believing in yourself.
Belief, yeah.
No one is going to believe in you until you do.
Yeah.
And even if it takes a while to get to number 2, you're already doubled once you get there. Then the next one's even easier because you got 2 people in that camp. And it just takes one more and one more and one more. But oftentimes the biggest challenge that we all have is simply making the choice to believe in ourselves.
Believe in yourself.
That we're worthwhile, that we have something worth contributing. And I think that we just forget that no matter what path in life you've lived a unique path. I always used to, I would always imagine myself as a kid, like talking to the president. And I thought, what would I have to say to the president of the United States? And then I realized we're both people. So most of the things in the world we share are mostly the same. And the things that are different are actually the things that he would find interesting.
Yeah. Simply
being a boy from Dayton, Ohio, that grew up in that life and that world would fascinate him just as much as him being a person in that office fascinates me. And so when you engage with people from that level, you see that you share most things, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in the world, and that the little things that make you different go both ways. It really frees you to say, wow, what a wonderful place to be in. Like the world just opens up. Like, yeah, that's why running a podcast must be the most incredible thing. You can bring in so many different guests and realize, yeah, they all have this veneer of difference, but deep down, we're all just humans. Just trying to figure it out, just trying to do what's right.
It's important to remember that when you meet people, president of people of prominence, you're a human being. And if anything, that person who is like a hero to you if you can just ignore for a second that, that this person is who he is, and you just come at him as a human that you are, I think the conversation would run a little longer.
Yeah, it does, because that's what do we all experience each day? It's our own humanity. We both have fears, we have faith, we have all these conflicting forces, and we're all wrestling, no matter how big or small they are, to do the best we can. And when we get past all this stuff and we stop seeing eye to eye and start seeing heart to heart, beautiful things can happen. And I think the best podcasts like this one are the ones that unlock that in people, because that's what makes people watch. That's what makes people engage. People want more of that in their lives. And really, like, connection and conversation is the way it comes out.
Absolutely. Well, let's close. I heard a camera. I have like a PTSD of like of one of the cameras ending. I mean, 107 podcasts. I've seen enough.
Yeah. Like false starts and things like that.
Just cutting for no reason. I mean, full memory, battery's full, but it just decided to cut. One of the reasons why it's 19 degrees in here, Fahrenheit, centigrade. Let's close with this one. 5 years from now, is there something that on a personal level you would like to see come to fruition?
Yeah.
5 or so years from now, is there something that you're hoping to achieve by then?
I hope that if we were doing another episode of this,
and we will,
that instead of doing it here, we could be at some place, some facility that me and the firm were a part of building here in the kingdom. Wow. To say that we actually put something in the ground, that we were part of building a future. Mm-hmm. That's this dream materialized.
I love it. Brick and mortar or something with your fingerprints on it.
Yeah, our fingerprints.
Yeah, ours. Thank you so much for the wealth of information that you shared. Thank you for investing, coming, sharing your everything with me, with the country, and really, it feels like you're a citizen of the country, honestly. And I know they're giving out citizenships these days, so hopefully one day you can be qualified for that. Again, honestly, I really appreciate you for what you've done, the time you've given me, and I'm really interested to see everything pan out. I mean, it was a very, very, the word isn't interesting. It was just a profound conversation. So thank you. I want to return the thanks, because the only reason, and one of the big reasons I'm here, is because of your show. It really opened my eyes to a world that I truly knew nothing about. I don't think people realize like how much of a barrier there is between understanding this place, living in America. And like your voice and what you talk about and who you meet with is partially what's changing that perspective. And it was a real part of my journey. So if we do build that thing, like, your fingerprints will truly be on it. Thank you. Honestly, you saying that right now is one of the highlights of my 3-year career as a podcaster. Saying what you just said right now. And I'm not even BSing you. I'm dead serious. Thanks, Cameron. Much appreciated. I really do appreciate your time. All the best with everything going forward, and hopefully we can do something that you just said 5 years from now. I love it. 2029, inshallah. Inshallah. Thanks a lot, brother. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Rogan, send him.